Hey there. Welcome back to Scary Times. The clock just struck midnight, and there's something unsettling about tonight's atmosphere. I've got some terrifying tales that'll make you question every shadow in your room. If you enjoy getting scared, with us, hit that subscribe button and join our haunted family. Now turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and let Scary Times guide you through tonight's collection of spine-chilling stories. I have always loved taking the metro. It's fast, cheap, and easy. I use it every day to go to work and come home. Most of the time, it feels safe, even late at night. But there was one night when everything changed, and now I can never take the last train without feeling afraid. That day, I worked late at the office. By the time I finished, it was almost midnight. I rushed to the metro station, hoping to catch the last train. The station was almost empty, just a few people waiting. On the platform, the lights were bright, but the air felt cold and heavy. I tapped my Easy card and hurried down the stairs, my footsteps echoing. The train arrived with a loud screech. The doors opened, and I stepped inside. There were only a few passengers, an old woman sitting near the door, a man in a suit staring at his phone, and a young girl with a suitcase. I looked around for a seat and saw that the priority seats were all empty. I remembered my mother always said not to sit there unless you really needed to, but I was so tired, and my feet hurt. I sat down in the nearest priority seat, telling myself it didn't matter since the train was almost empty. The doors closed and the train started moving. It felt slower than usual. The lights flickered for a second, then came back on. I tried to relax, listening to the soft hum of the train. The old woman near the door was mumbling to herself. The man in the suit kept looking at his phone, never blinking. The young girl with the suitcase stared out the window, even though there was nothing to see except the darkness of the tunnel. After a few stops, the train became even emptier. The old woman got off, but before she left, she looked at me and shook her head. I thought she was just annoyed I was in the priority seat. The man in the suit moved to another car, and the girl with the suitcase stayed where she was. I was alone in my section now. Suddenly, I heard a voice next to me. "You shouldn't sit there." I looked up. The girl with the suitcase had moved, and was now sitting across from me. Her eyes were dark and serious. "Why not?" I asked, trying to sound brave. She didn't answer. She just hugged her suitcase and looked away. The train stopped at another station, but the doors didn't open. The train didn't move for a long time. I looked at the time. It was already past midnight. I started to feel nervous. The lights flickered again, and I heard a strange sound like someone was whispering behind me. I turned, but there was no one there. The girl was still sitting across from me, staring at her suitcase. Finally, the train started moving again, but it felt different. The lights were dimmer, and the windows showed nothing but black. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. I tried to look at the map above the door, but all the station names were blurred, like someone had wiped them away. Then I saw something strange in the window. It was my reflection, but behind me, there was a shadowy figure. It looked like a person, but its face was pale and twisted with dark, empty eyes. I turned around quickly, but no one was there. My heart was pounding. The girl spoke again. "Don't look behind you." Her voice was cold. "If you see it, it will follow you home." I tried to laugh, but my voice shook. "Is this a joke?" I asked. She shook her head. "You broke the rule. You sat in the wrong seat at the wrong time." At the next stop, the train doors opened, but the station was dark and empty. I didn't recognize it. The sign was broken, and there were no people, no lights, nothing. The girl stood up, dragging her suitcase. She looked at me. "If you want to leave, get off now. If you stay, you'll never get home." She walked out of the train and disappeared into the darkness. I wanted to follow her, but my legs wouldn't move. The doors closed and the train started again. I was alone now. The whispering grew louder. I felt cold hands on my shoulders. I tried to stand up, but I was frozen in the seat. My eyes were fixed on the window. The shadowy figure was still there, closer now. Its mouth opened wide, but no sound came out. Suddenly, the train stopped again. This time, the doors opened, and I saw a cleaning lady in a uniform standing on the platform. She looked surprised to see me. "Are you all right?" she asked. I jumped up and ran out of the train, almost falling on the platform. She helped me up. The train doors closed behind me, and the train left. Empty. I thanked the cleaning lady and asked her where I was. She told me I was at the last station, but I didn't remember ever seeing it before. She walked me to the exit and called a taxi for me. I got home safely that night, but I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the shadowy figure in my mind, and I heard whispers in the dark corners of my room. The next day I tried to forget about it. I went to work as usual and told myself it was just a nightmare. But then I heard on the news that someone had died on the last train that night. A man in a suit was found in the priority seat, his eyes wide open, mouth twisted in terror. The police said there was no sign of anyone else on the train, but the surveillance footage showed a shadowy figure standing behind him just before he died. I never take the last train anymore. I never sit in the priority seat unless I really need to. And I never ever talk to strangers on the train at night. Sometimes, when I ride the metro late, I think about that night and wonder if the shadow is still out there, waiting for someone to break the rules. I work late hours in the city, so I often take the metro home after midnight. My job is tiring, and sometimes I just want to sleep on the train. One night, I finished work even later than usual. The streets were empty, and the air felt heavy. I rushed into the metro station, swiping my Easy card at the gate. The last train was about to leave. I ran down the stairs and jumped in just before the doors closed. The train was almost empty. Only a few people sat scattered in the cars. There was a young woman with a suitcase, an old man reading a newspaper, and a man in a black suit staring at his phone. The lights in the car flickered, making everything look strange. I found an empty seat near the door and sat down, feeling tired and a little uneasy. As the train started moving, I noticed the priority seats were all empty. I remembered my mother always told me not to sit there unless I needed to. But I was so tired that night. My legs hurt and the regular seats looked dirty. I thought, it's so late and no one will care. So I moved to the priority seat and closed my eyes. The train rattled through the tunnels. I tried to rest, but I felt like someone was watching me. I opened my eyes and saw the man in the black suit looking at me. His eyes were dark and empty. I looked away, pretending not to notice. The train stopped at a station, but no one got on or off. The doors opened and closed with a hiss. After a few minutes, I heard someone whispering. I looked around, but the other passengers didn't seem to notice. The young woman was staring at her suitcase, and the old man was still reading. The man in the black suit had turned away. The whispering grew louder, like it was right next to my ear. I felt cold all over. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out for a few seconds. When they came back on, I saw a new passenger sitting across from me. It was a woman with long hair covering her face. She wore a white dress and held a ticket in her hand. I didn't remember seeing her get on. She sat in the other priority seat, not moving, not making a sound. I tried to ignore her, but I couldn't stop looking. Her hair was so long that I couldn't see her face at all. She didn't move, not even when the train shook. I wondered if she was real, or just my imagination. I looked at the reflection in the window, but her seat was empty in the glass. My heart started beating faster. At the next station, the doors opened, but again, no one got on or off. The woman in white was still there. The train felt colder. I could see my breath in the air. I wanted to move to another car, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt stuck, like something was holding me in place. The old man suddenly stood up and walked toward the door. As he passed the woman in white, he dropped his newspaper. He bent down to pick it up and looked up at her. For a moment, I saw his face twist in fear. He stumbled back, dropped his newspaper, and ran to the next car. The doors closed behind him. The young woman with the suitcase started crying softly. She hugged her bag and stared at the floor. The man in the black suit put his phone away and looked out the window, his hands shaking. The woman in white didn't move. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, just my tired mind playing tricks. The train kept moving through the dark tunnels. The next station was mine. I stood up, but the doors didn't open. The train didn't stop. It just kept going, faster and faster. The lights flickered again. I looked at the woman in white. She slowly turned her head toward me. I still couldn't see her face, just a mass of dark hair. She raised her hand and pointed at me with her ticket. I heard a voice in my head, soft and cold. "That seat is not for you." My body felt numb. I tried to move, but I couldn't. The other passengers were frozen too, staring at the woman in white. The train sped through station after station, never stopping. Suddenly, the train jerked to a stop in the middle of a dark tunnel. The lights went out completely. I heard footsteps coming closer. I felt something cold brush against my arm. I screamed, but no sound came out. I closed my eyes and prayed for the train to start moving again. When the lights came back on, the woman in white was gone. The train was at the next station. The doors opened and the other passengers rushed out. I followed them, my legs shaking. I looked back at the train. The priority seat where the woman in white had sat was now empty, but there was a dark stain on the seat. I ran up the stairs and out of the station. The air outside felt fresh, but I couldn't stop shaking. I went home and locked my door. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the woman in white in my mind, her long hair and the ticket in her hand. The next day, I read the news. A man was found dead on the train that morning. He was the old man who had dropped his newspaper. They said he was found sitting in the priority seat, eyes wide open, mouth twisted in fear. There were strange scratches on his arms and neck. The police didn't know what happened. I never took the last train again. I never sat in the priority seat, even when I was tired. Sometimes late at night, I hear whispering when I pass the metro station. I keep my head down and walk faster. I don't talk to strangers, and I never look at the reflections in the train windows. A few weeks later, I checked the Metro website. They had posted a short video from the train's surveillance camera. It showed the old man sitting in the priority seat. For a few seconds, a blurry white shape appeared next to him. Then the screen went black. Now, whenever I travel at night, I keep my ticket close and never sit in the wrong seat. Some places on the train are not for the living. Some passengers never get off. The city never sleeps, but late at night it feels different. The streets are empty and shadows stretch across the pavement. I was waiting for the last train home after a long day at work. It was nearly midnight, and the station was eerily quiet. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, casting strange shadows on the walls. I had my ticket in hand, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. The last train was always a bit unsettling. I remembered the stories my friends told about strange occurrences on the night train. They said it was haunted, that people had seen things they couldn't explain. I tried to shake off the feeling as I waited on the platform. Finally, I heard the distant sound of the train approaching. The lights of the train flickered as it pulled into the station. I stepped inside and the familiar smell of metal and old upholstery hit me. The train was mostly empty, just a few other passengers scattered throughout the car. I took a seat near the window inside, ready to relax for the ride home. As the train started moving, I noticed a man sitting across from me. He looked ordinary enough, wearing a dark coat and a hat pulled low over his eyes. I tried to ignore him, focusing instead on the scenery flashing by outside. The city lights blurred into streaks of color, and I felt my eyelids growing heavy. Suddenly, the train jolted and the lights flickered again. I looked around, and the other passengers seemed unfazed. The man across from me, however, was staring directly at me. I felt a chill run down my spine. I quickly turned my gaze back to the window, trying to shake off the unease. A few minutes passed, and I heard a soft voice. "Do you believe in ghosts?" I looked up, surprised to find the man still watching me. "What?" I replied, my voice shaky. "Ghosts," he repeated, leaning forward slightly. "They ride the trains with us." I forced a laugh, trying to lighten the mood. "That's just a story," I said, but his expression didn't change. He seemed serious, almost intense. "I've seen them," he said quietly. "They come out at night when the train is empty." I felt my heart race. "Okay, that's enough," I said, trying to dismiss him. "I just want to get home." He leaned back, a strange smile creeping across his face. "You should be careful. he said. You never know who you're sitting next to. The train continued to rattle along the tracks, and I tried to ignore him. But the atmosphere felt heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I glanced at my watch. We were only a few stops from my destination. Just then, the lights flickered again, and the train came to an abrupt stop. I felt a surge of panic. The overhead announcements were silent, and the usual hum of the train was gone. I looked around. The other passengers were looking just as confused as I felt. "Why are we stopped?" I asked the man across from me, but he just smiled, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "Sometimes they don't want us to leave," he said softly. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The ones who ride with us," he replied, his tone chilling. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I wanted to get off this train. Just then, I noticed a figure at the far end of the car. It was a woman, her hair long and unkempt, wearing a tattered dress. She stood still, staring at us with hollow eyes. "Do you see her?" I asked, my voice trembling. The man nodded slowly. "She's one of them." I felt frozen in place, unable to look away. The woman took a step forward, and I could see her face more clearly. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes seemed to reflect nothing. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. I felt a pull, as if she were drawing me toward her. "Get away from her!" I shouted, suddenly finding my voice. I turned to the man, but he was gone. The seat across from me was empty. The train lurched again, and the lights flickered once more. I could hear whispers now, faint but growing louder. "Help us! Help us!" I jumped to my feet, panic rising in my chest. I rushed toward the door, but it wouldn't open. I banged on the glass, desperate to escape. "Let me out!" I screamed. The woman was closer now, her expression twisted in pain. "Help me," she repeated, reaching out her hand. I turned away, feeling tears streaming down my face. I had to get out. I stumbled back, looking for another way. The whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. "Help us." Suddenly, the lights went out completely, plunging the train into darkness. I felt a cold breeze sweep through the car, and the whispers turned into screams. "Get away from us," I shouted, feeling the weight of their despair. The lights flickered back on, and I saw the woman right in front of me. "Help me," she begged, her voice filled with anguish. I couldn't take it anymore. I closed my eyes and screamed. When I opened them again, I was standing on the platform, the train gone. My heart raced as I looked around. It was just me and the empty station. I felt dizzy, unsure of what had just happened. I stumbled toward the exit, my mind racing. I had to get home. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me, grounding me. But as I walked away, I glanced back at the station. I saw the man from the train standing in the shadows, watching me. His smile was wide, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I turned quickly and hurried away, hoping to leave the nightmares behind. I thought I was safe, but as I reached for my Easy card to pay for a taxi, I noticed something strange. It was wet, and I looked down to see it stained with a dark substance. I froze, realizing it was blood. My heart raced again as I turned to look back at the station. The man was gone, but the whispers lingered in my mind. "Help us!" I ran, not stopping until I reached my apartment. I locked the door behind me, breathing heavily. I felt safe inside, but the shadows in my room felt darker than usual. I tried to convince myself it was just a nightmare, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. I could still hear the whispers echoing in my mind. I knew I would never take the last train again. We always thought the old reservoir was just a place to hang out. It was hidden behind a row of trees at the edge of town. When I was a child, my grandmother told me not to go near the water, especially at night. She said there were things in the reservoir that would pull you under if you weren't careful. She talked about water ghosts, old offerings, and people who disappeared without a trace. I used to laugh at her stories. I thought she was just trying to scare me. But as I got older, I started to notice things. Sometimes at dusk, I would see fishermen packing up in a hurry, leaving their nets behind. Sometimes there were old incense burners and faded photos left on the rocks by the water. My friend Wei said these were offerings for the water gods. He said it was bad luck to touch them, but some kids would throw them into the water for fun. I never did. It was the last week of summer break when everything happened. My friends and I wanted to do something special before school started. There were 4 of us, me, Wei, his cousin Ming, and our classmate Eric. Eric was the one who suggested we go to the reservoir at night. He said it would be cool to swim under the stars. Wei and I weren't sure, but Ming said he wasn't scared. In the end, we all agreed. We met at the edge of the trees just after sunset. The sky was still blue, but the water looked almost black. We brought snacks, a lifebuoy, and a bamboo pole just in case. Eric joked that if a water ghost grabbed us, we could use the pole to fight it off. We told him not to say things like that by the water. Eric just laughed. We walked down to the shore. There was a small pier and a few fishing boats tied up. Someone had left an old incense burner on the dock with ashes still inside. There was also a faded photo, maybe of a fisherman. I felt a chill. But Eric picked up the incense burner and pretended to pray. Ming laughed and said he was being stupid. Wei told them to put it back, but Eric tossed the incense burner into the water. It made a small splash and sank. The air felt colder after that. Wei looked nervous. He said we should leave the offerings alone. Eric rolled his eyes and dared us to jump in. Ming and Eric were the first to dive into the water. I hesitated, but I didn't want to look scared, so I followed. Wei stayed on the shore holding the lifebuoy and the bamboo pole. The water was cold and deep. I could barely see my own hands. Ming splashed me and laughed. Eric swam out farther, calling for us to follow. I heard Wei call out, telling us not to go too far. Suddenly Eric shouted, "Hey, look at this!" He was holding something in his hand, something long and thin. It was a rope, old and dirty, covered in green slime. Eric said it was a water ghost rope, the kind people used to tie around their waists so they wouldn't get pulled under. He waved it at us, then threw it toward the shore. Wei caught the rope and threw it back. They started laughing, tossing the rope back and forth. I felt uneasy. The water around me felt colder. I saw something move under the surface, just a shadow. I told Ming, but he said it was just a fish. After a while, Eric swam back to the pier and climbed out. Ming and I followed. Wei looked upset. He said we shouldn't play with things we didn't understand. Eric laughed and said nothing bad would happen. He picked up the old photo from the dock and tossed it into the water too. Now the ghosts have something to look at, he joked. It was getting late and the air felt heavy. We packed up our things and started to leave. As we walked back through the trees, I heard something splash behind us. I turned, but there was nothing there. Wei kept looking back, holding the bamboo pole tightly. That night I had trouble sleeping. I dreamed of dark water and cold hands grabbing my ankles. I woke up sweating. The next morning, my mom said someone drowned at the reservoir. She heard it from a neighbor. I ran outside and called Wei. He sounded scared. He said he couldn't reach Eric. Ming called and said he hadn't seen Eric since last night. We decided to go to the reservoir. When we got there, the police had already put up tape around the pier. A small crowd gathered by the water. We saw a group of fishermen standing by the shore talking in low voices. Wei's uncle was there too. He was a fisherman and knew everyone in the area. We waited by the trees watching. After a while, 2 men in uniforms pulled something out of the water. It was Eric. His body was pale, his eyes wide open, and his hands were clenched as if he was grabbing something. There was a long rope tangled around his legs, the same water ghost rope from last night. No one spoke. I felt sick. Ming started crying. Wei looked away, his face white as paper. The police said Eric must have gone back to swim alone and got caught in the rope. But we all knew that wasn't true. Eric was a good swimmer. The rope had been on the dock, not in the water, and Eric would never swim alone at night. Wei's uncle came over and told us to go home. He said we had broken the rules and made the water spirits angry. He said we should pray and bring new offerings to the reservoir. That night, Wei and I went back to the water's edge with new incense sticks and a photo of Eric. We set them on the rocks and bowed. The air was still and silent. I felt like something was watching us from the water. After that, I never went swimming at the reservoir again. Ming moved away with his family. Wei and I stopped talking about that night. Sometimes I see fishermen leave offerings by the water. Sometimes I hear stories about people disappearing or about shadows moving under the surface. I always remember Eric's face, his hands clenched around that old rope. Now, whenever I walk by the reservoir, I bow my head and whisper a prayer. I never throw anything into the water. I never talk about ghosts by the shore. I know now that some stories are true. The water remembers everything. I grew up in a small town near the water. There was a big pond at the edge of the village surrounded by old trees and thick grass. People said the pond was deep and dangerous. My grandmother used to warn me, don't play near the water at night. The water ghosts are hungry after dark. I always laughed at her stories. To me, the pond was just a quiet place where frogs croaked and dragonflies danced. One summer, my friends and I spent our days fishing and swimming. There were 4 of us, me, my best friend Ming, and 2 other boys, Hao and Jun. We liked to skip stones and see who could throw the farthest. There was a bamboo pole by the edge and an old life buoy hung from a tree. Sometimes we found incense burners or joss sticks left by the water. Old people would come early in the morning to burn incense and pray for safety. We thought it was funny. We were young and didn't believe in ghosts. One evening we decided to swim after sunset. The air was still hot and the water looked cool and inviting. Ming said, "Let's see who can swim to the middle first." We all jumped in, laughing and splashing. The water felt nice at first, but as the sky grew darker, I felt uneasy. The pond was quiet, too quiet. I could not see the bottom and the water felt heavy. Hao started telling ghost stories while we floated in the water. He talked about the water ghost, with green skin and long hair, waiting at the bottom to pull people down. Jun threw a stick into the water and joked, "Maybe the ghost will take this as an offering." Ming laughed and splashed water at him. I felt a cold breeze on my neck, even though the air was warm. Suddenly, I saw something floating near the edge. It looked like an old photo, half sunk in the water. I swam closer and picked it up. It was faded, but I could see a group of children standing by the pond, just like us. Their faces were blurry, and one of them had no eyes. I showed it to my friends. Ming said it was just trash, but Hao looked scared. He said, "We should put it back, maybe it belongs to someone." I threw the photo back into the water. As soon as I did, the wind picked up, and the surface of the pond rippled. I felt something brush against my leg, cold and slimy. I screamed and swam back to the shore. The others followed, laughing, but I could see they were nervous too. We sat on the grass, shivering. Hao said we should go home, but Jun wanted to stay longer. Jun stood up and shouted into the water, "Hey, water ghost! Come and get me if you dare." Ming told him to stop, but Jun kept laughing. He picked up the bamboo pole and poked at the water. Then he threw an old joss stick into the pond and said, "Here's your offering." I felt sick. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. The sun had set, and the sky was dark. We decided to leave. As we walked away, I looked back at the pond. I thought I saw something moving just under the surface, but it was too dark to tell. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I dreamed I was in the water, sinking deeper and deeper. Cold hands grabbed my ankles, pulling me down. I woke up gasping for air. In the morning, I found out Jun was missing. His mother came to our house crying. She said he never came home. The whole village searched for him. We went to the pond with bamboo poles and ropes, calling his name. The lifeguard and some fishermen helped too. They dragged the water for hours. Finally, someone shouted. I ran over and saw Jun's body floating near the old lifebuoy. His face was pale and his eyes were wide open, staring at the sky. His hands were clutching the water ghost rope, the one people used to tie around their waists for safety. There were red marks on his ankles, like someone had grabbed him. Ming fell to his knees and started crying. Hao covered his face and shook. I felt cold all over. The adults pulled June out of the water and laid him on the grass. His mother screamed and hugged him. The fishermen burned incense and joss paper by the pond, praying for his soul. The old priest said we had broken too many taboos. He scolded us for swimming at night, throwing offerings, and making fun of the water spirits. He said we needed to make peace with the water god. For days, the pond felt different. The air was heavy and the water was still. No one dared to go near it. At night, I heard strange noises outside my window, like someone calling my name. I was too scared to look. Ming stopped talking to anyone. Hao moved away with his family. I stayed in the village, but I never went near the pond again. Sometimes when I walk past the old tree, I see the life buoy swinging in the wind. I remember Jun's face, pale and afraid. I think about the old photo, the one with the children by the water. I wonder if they broke the rules too. My grandmother still burns incense by the pond every month. She says the water ghosts are always hungry, waiting for someone to forget the old ways. Now, when I hear children laughing by the water, I tell them to go home before dark. I hope they listen. Every year, my family told me to be careful during the 7th lunar month. They called it Ghost Month. My grandma said the gates of the underworld opened, and lost spirits wandered everywhere. She always warned me about the taboos. Don't dry clothes outside at night. Don't pick up red envelopes from the ground. Don't eat food from roadside offerings. And never take random photos at night. As a student, I didn't really believe all these old stories. My friends and I thought they were just superstitions. But that summer, something happened that changed my mind forever. It started with a group chat. My classmate, Ben, sent a message. Let's go take pictures at the riverside tonight. There's a big offering ceremony and a temporary stage for the opera. I heard it's super creepy. Some friends were excited. They wanted to see the paper effigies and the joss paper burning. Ben joked, maybe we'll catch a ghost in a photo. I was nervous, but I didn't want to look scared, so I agreed to go. That night, we met near the river. The air was hot and sticky. I saw tables set up along the street covered with food, incense, and candles. There were piles of joss paper and paper houses for the spirits. The smell of burning incense filled the air. On the stage, actors in colorful costumes put on a loud, strange opera. My grandma said these performances were for the ghosts, not for people. Ben brought his camera. He kept snapping photos of everything. The offerings, the paper effigies, even the ditch by the road where people threw burning joss paper. He laughed and said, if I see a ghost, I'll sell the photo online. I felt uneasy. I remembered my grandma's warning. Never take random photos during Ghost Month. We walked past a makeshift shed where workers were preparing more offerings. I saw a pile of red envelopes on the table. Each one was thick and shiny. Ben reached out and picked one up. Hey, free money, he shouted. I told him to put it back, but he just laughed. It's just an envelope, he said. He slipped it into his pocket. We watched the opera for a while. The actors' faces were painted white and red. Their voices sounded strange, echoing in the night. The crowd was quiet. Suddenly, Ben said he was hungry. He walked over to one of the tables and grabbed a piece of chicken from the offering plate. Food for the living, right? He joked, taking a big bite. I was shocked. That's for the ghosts, I whispered. Ben shrugged. I don't see any ghosts. After a while, we sat by the river. The water was dark and silent. Some people were burning joss paper by the riverbank, sending it to the spirits in the water. Ben took more photos, even of the people burning paper. He turned to me and said, "You're too scared. These are just old stories." I tried to laugh, but I felt cold. On the way home, we passed a row of clothes hanging outside a house. The owner must have forgotten to bring them in. Ben pulled down a shirt and waved it around. "Look, I'm breaking all the rules tonight," he shouted. I begged him to stop, but he just laughed and threw the shirt back. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the taboos Ben had broken. I heard strange noises outside my window. The next morning I checked our group chat. Ben hadn't sent any new messages. Usually he was the first to post. At school, Ben didn't show up. His phone went straight to voicemail. Our teacher said he was absent. I felt a knot in my stomach. After class, I went to Ben's house with 2 other friends. His mother opened the door. Her eyes were red. She said Ben hadn't come out of his room since last night. He just sat on his bed staring at the floor, not talking or eating. We went to his room. Ben was sitting on the bed holding the red envelope. His face was pale and his eyes were wide open. He didn't look at us. He just kept whispering, "Sorry, sorry, I didn't mean to," over and over. There was a strange cold smell in the room, like incense and river water. On his desk, I saw the camera. The screen was cracked. I picked it up and turned it on. The last photo was of Ben, standing by the river, but behind him was a shadowy figure. It looked like a woman in white, with long hair covering her face. Her hands were reaching for Ben's shoulder. I showed the photo to my friends. One of them started crying. Ben's mother called for help. That night, Ben was taken to the hospital. The doctor said he was in shock, but his body was cold, almost, like he had been outside in the river all night. He never woke up. The next day, Ben died. The doctors couldn't explain it. They said his heart just stopped. At the funeral, his mother burned all his clothes and the red envelope. She threw the camera into the river. After Ben's death, I followed every Ghost Month taboo. I never dried clothes outside at night. I never picked up anything from the ground, especially red envelopes. I never ate offering food or took photos at night during the 7th month. I still remember Ben's face, the way he whispered, "Sorry," and the shadowy figure in the photo. Sometimes when I walk by the river during Ghost Month, I see offerings floating on the water and smell incense in the air. I think of Ben and wonder if he's still trapped on the other side, waiting for someone to break the rules again. I was never a superstitious person, but my family always told me to be careful during Ghost Month. Every year when the 7th lunar month came, my grandmother would remind me not to do anything disrespectful. She said the spirits would come back to visit and we should show respect. I used to laugh and say it was just old stories, but last year something happened that changed my mind forever. It started on a hot evening in August. The city was busy with Ghost Month rituals. On every street corner, there were tables filled with food, incense, and joss paper for the wandering spirits. I saw people burning joss paper, bowing, and lighting candles. Some people even wore amulets for protection. My friend Kevin and I were both students, and we had to walk home late after our evening class. We passed by a small riverside park where people were setting up a temporary stage for an opera performance. There were paper effigies and piles of joss paper everywhere. The air was thick with the smell of incense and smoke. That night I remembered my grandmother's words. Don't eat the offering food, don't take photos, and never pick up red envelopes on the street. Kevin, though, didn't care about any of that. He liked to joke about ghosts, and he said all these taboos were just for fun. As we walked past the stage, we saw a group of workers setting up tables with fruit, rice, and drinks. There were red envelopes placed on some plates. I told Kevin not to touch anything, but he just laughed and said, "What's the worst that could happen?" We kept walking, and soon we reached the edge of the river. There were more offerings placed along the water, with candles floating on little boats. I could hear people praying softly. The sky was dark, and the moon was hidden behind clouds. Kevin pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of the offerings and the floating candles. I told him to stop, but he said he wanted to post them online. He even took a selfie with the joss paper burning in the background. As we walked away from the river, I noticed a small red envelope lying near the ditch. It looked new and shiny. I remembered the stories my grandmother told me. Never pick up a red envelope during Ghost Month. Sometimes, they said, those envelopes were left by spirits, and if you picked one up, you would be marked. Kevin saw it too. Before I could stop him, he bent down and picked it up. He shook it and laughed. "Maybe there's money inside," he said. But when he opened it, there was only a small piece of yellow paper with strange writing on it. He shrugged and put it in his pocket. I felt uneasy after that. I told Kevin to throw it away, but he just waved me off. We walked back to the main road. On the way, we passed another table of offerings. Kevin, still joking, grabbed a piece of cake from the table and took a bite. "Offerings taste just like normal food," he said, laughing. I was angry and scared. I told him to spit it out and apologize, but he just kept laughing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Kevin did. I heard strange noises outside my window, like whispering and footsteps. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. But the next day, when I went to meet Kevin for lunch, he didn't show up. I called him, but his phone was off. I messaged him, but there was no reply. That evening, I went to his apartment. The building was old and the lights in the hallway flickered. I knocked on his door, but no one answered. I called his name, but there was only silence. I was about to leave when I heard a strange sound coming from inside his room, like someone crying softly. The door wasn't locked, so I pushed it open. The room was dark and cold. The curtains were closed, and the only light came from Kevin's phone, which was lying on the floor with the screen still on. I saw the red envelope on his desk, next to the piece of yellow paper. The paper looked even stranger now, as if the writing was moving. I called out Kevin's name again, but there was no answer. I slowly walked toward his bed. That's when I saw him. Kevin was lying on his back, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. His face was pale, and his mouth was open as if he had tried to scream. His hands were clenched around the red envelope. There was a strange smell in the room, like burnt incense and something rotten. I froze. I couldn't move or speak. My heart was beating so fast I thought I might faint. Suddenly, Kevin's phone vibrated and the screen lit up. There was a photo on the screen, the selfie he took at the river, but something was wrong. Behind him, in the photo, was a shadowy figure with long hair and empty eyes standing among the burning joss paper. I dropped the phone and ran out of the room. I called the police. When they arrived, they said Kevin had died of a heart attack, but he was young and healthy. They didn't find anything strange. They took the red envelope and the yellow paper as evidence, but I heard later that both disappeared from the police station. No one could explain it. After Kevin's funeral, I started having nightmares. I saw the shadowy figure in my dream standing at the foot of my bed holding a red envelope. I heard whispers at night calling my name. My grandmother came to our house and burned incense for me. She told me to never break the taboos again. Even now, when Ghost Month comes, I avoid walking near the river at night. I never take photos of offerings or pick up anything from the ground. Sometimes I see red envelopes lying by the roadside and I walk away quickly. I don't laugh at my grandmother's stories anymore. I know now that the spirits are real and they remember everything. I moved to the city for my first real job. I was excited but worried about money, so I found a cheap room in an old apartment building. It was on the top floor, one of those rooftop additions, with a small bathroom and a shared kitchen downstairs. The walls were thin, and the elevator was always slow, but the rent was low and the landlord seemed nice. He was an old man with a bunch of keys hanging from his belt. He gave me a red envelope with the lease inside saying it was good luck. My room was small, just a bed, a desk, and a closet. There was an old suitcase in the corner when I moved in. The landlord said it belonged to the last tenant who left in a hurry and never came back for it. He told me not to touch it and promised he would get rid of it soon. I didn't think much about it at first. I was busy with work, trying to get used to the city and my new life. At night, the building was quiet except for the sound of water pipes and the elevator groaning. Sometimes I heard footsteps in the hallway, but when I looked, no one was there. I told myself it was just other tenants coming home late. One night I stayed up late working and felt thirsty. I went to the kitchen for water and saw the landlord at the end of the hall checking the doors. He didn't see me, but I noticed he stopped at my door and tried the handle with one of his keys before moving on. I felt a chill but decided not to think about it. A few days later, I started having strange dreams. In the dream, I was lying in bed, unable to move. Someone was standing at the foot of my bed watching me. I couldn't see their face, but I felt cold and scared. When I woke up, my heart was pounding and the room felt colder than usual. I checked the door, but it was locked. One night I had to do laundry late because I forgot during the day. The laundry room was in the basement, dark and damp. As I washed my clothes, I felt like someone was watching me from the corner. I turned around, but no one was there. The lights flickered and I hurried to finish. When I went back upstairs, the elevator stopped at the wrong floor. The doors opened, and I saw a woman standing in the hallway, wearing old clothes and holding a red envelope. She looked at me but didn't say anything. I pressed the button for my floor and the doors closed. When I got to my room, I looked out the peephole, but the hallway was empty. After that, strange things started happening. Sometimes I heard someone whispering my name at night. My things would move around when I wasn't looking. The old suitcase in the corner seemed to shift positions by itself. I asked the landlord again to take it away, but he just nodded and said, "Soon." One night, I came home late from work. The hallway lights were out, and I used my phone as a flashlight. As I opened my door, I felt a cold wind behind me. I turned, but nothing was there. I went inside and locked the door. I was too tired to care, so I went to wash my face before bed. I remembered my mother used to say it was bad luck to look in the mirror at midnight, but I didn't believe in that stuff. I glanced at the clock. It was just past midnight. I looked in the mirror and saw my own tired face. Then behind me, I saw a shadow move. I turned quickly, but the room was empty. My heart raced. I tried to laugh it off and went to bed. That night, I dreamed of the suitcase. In the dream, it was open, and someone was crawling out of it, pale and thin, with long black hair covering their face. The next day, I was too scared to stay in the room. I went to work early and came home late. I avoided looking at the suitcase, but that night, I heard scratching sounds coming from the closet. I opened it and saw nothing, but the suitcase had moved closer to the bed. I decided to call the landlord and ask him to come right away. He said he would come in the morning. I couldn't sleep, so I watched TV until I was too tired to keep my eyes open. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up and saw the suitcase lid was open. I was sure I had never touched it. I got out of bed and went to close it, but when I reached out, I felt something cold grab my wrist. I screamed and jerked my hand back. The lid slammed shut by itself. I ran out of the room and spent the rest of the night in the stairwell. In the morning, the landlord arrived with his keys. He looked tired and unhappy. He opened the door and we both went inside. The suitcase was still in the corner, closed. The landlord sighed and said he would finally take it away. He picked it up, but it was heavier than it looked. He struggled to carry it out. A few hours later, the police came to the building. They knocked on my door and asked me questions about the landlord. I told them everything I knew. They said someone had found the landlord dead in the basement next to the suitcase. I went down with them. The basement was cold and dark. The landlord was lying on the floor, eyes wide open, mouth twisted in fear. The suitcase was open, and there were scratch marks on the inside of the lid. The police asked if I had seen anything strange. I just shook my head. After that, I couldn't stay in the apartment. I moved out as soon as I could. Sometimes late at night, I dream of the suitcase opening by itself and someone crawling out reaching for me. I hear whispers in the dark, calling my name. I avoid old apartments now, and I never ever look in the mirror at midnight. I moved to the city for work and needed a cheap place to live. I found an old apartment online. The rent was low, and the landlord said I could move in right away. The building was old, with peeling paint and a rusty elevator. My room was on the top floor, in a rooftop addition. The hallway was narrow and the lights flickered. I was tired from moving, but I felt lucky to find a place so quickly. The landlord was an old woman. She gave me the keys and a red envelope for good luck. She said, "Don't worry about the neighbors, they keep to themselves." She didn't smile. She handed me the lease and told me to sign it. Her hands were cold and thin. I signed the lease and took the keys. My room was small but clean. There was a bed, a desk, and an old suitcase in the corner. I tried to move the suitcase, but it was heavy. I figured it belonged to the last tenant. I was too tired to care, so I left it there. That night, I unpacked my things and took a shower. The water was cold, and the pipes made strange noises. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. My face looked pale under the weak light. I remembered something my grandmother used to say, "Don't look in the mirror at midnight." I laughed and went to bed. The first few days were normal. I went to work, came home, cooked simple meals. I didn't see any of my neighbors. Sometimes I heard footsteps in the hallway, but when I opened the door, no one was there. The elevator was slow and made loud clanking sounds. I started using the stairs. One night I couldn't sleep. I heard someone doing laundry in the shared bathroom down the hall. It was almost 2 a.m. The washing machine rattled and shook. I thought, it was strange, but maybe someone worked late shifts. I tried to ignore it. A few days later, I met a student who lived across the hall. His name was Kevin. He was friendly but looked tired. He said the apartment had a lot of rules. "Don't move anything that isn't yours," he warned. "And don't burn anything in your room." I asked about the old suitcase. He shook his head. "That belonged to the last tenant. She left in a hurry. No one knows where she went." That night, I stared at the suitcase. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to open it. The lock was broken, so I lifted the lid. Inside were old clothes, a notebook, and a small mirror. The clothes smelled musty. The notebook was full of messy writing, all in a language I didn't understand. The mirror was wrapped in a red cloth. I felt uneasy, so I closed the suitcase and pushed it back into the corner. Strange things started happening after that. Sometimes I heard whispering at night. Sometimes I saw shadows move in the corner of my eye. The elevator stopped working, and the lights in the hallway went out. One night I woke up and saw the reflection of a woman in my mirror. She stood behind me, her face pale and her hair long and messy. I turned around, but no one was there. My heart pounded. I covered the mirror with a towel and tried to sleep. The next day, I asked the landlord if anyone had died in my room. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "People come and go. Some never leave." She gave me a new key and told me to keep my door locked at night. I started feeling scared in my own room. I tried to spend more time outside. One evening, I came home and found a red envelope on my bed. Inside was a single coin. I didn't know who put it there. I asked Kevin, but he said he hadn't seen anyone. I checked the surveillance cameras in the hallway. The landlord had shown me how to use them when I moved in. I watched the footage from that day. Around noon, I saw the old woman landlord enter my room with her spare key. She left the red envelope on my bed and walked out. But as she closed the door, I saw a shadowy figure standing behind her. The figure was tall and thin with long hair covering its face. The landlord didn't seem to notice. That night, I dreamed of the woman with long hair. She whispered in my ear, telling me to leave. When I woke up, I found scratches on my arm. The mirror had fallen off the wall and shattered on the floor. I decided to talk to the other tenants. Most of them didn't want to speak. One migrant worker told me he saw the same woman in his dreams. He said she cried every night and asked for help. He moved out the next day. I wanted to leave too, but I had nowhere else to go. I called a real estate agent to help me find a new place. She came to see the apartment. When she walked in, she shivered and said the room felt cold. She looked at the suitcase and the broken mirror. She suggested I move out as soon as possible. That night, I heard someone burning joss paper in the hallway. The smell was strong and bitter. I opened my door and saw a neighbor kneeling on the floor, burning paper and muttering prayers. He looked up at me and said, "She's angry. Someone disturbed her things." I closed my door and packed my bags. I decided to stay at a friend's place until I could find a new apartment. Before I left, I saw the landlord in the hallway. She looked at me with sad eyes. "Not everyone can live here," she said. "Some rooms remember." The next morning, I heard that Kevin was dead. The police came and blocked off his room. They said he was found lying on his bed, eyes wide open, mouth twisted in fear. His hands were clutching the old suitcase. There were deep scratches on his arms and neck. The police asked if I knew anything, but I just shook my head. I moved out that day. I never went back to that apartment. Sometimes I still dream of the woman with long hair standing in the corner of my room whispering my name. I wake up sweating, afraid to look in the mirror. I keep my doors locked, and I never touch things that aren't mine. Sometimes when I walk past old buildings, I see red envelopes on the doorsteps. I remember the landlord's words, some rooms remember, some things should never be disturbed. The ancient temple stood in silence, hidden among the trees. Its wooden structure was worn but beautiful, with intricate carvings that told stories of the past. The air felt thick with history, and I could sense the weight of many prayers whispered in the shadows. My friends and I had come here to explore, drawn by tales of spirits that roamed the grounds. As we approached the temple, we passed under a grand torii gate. It loomed above us, painted in bright red. I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something about this place that felt sacred, almost alive. "Are you sure we should be here?" I asked, glancing at my friends Ken and Yuki. They shrugged, excitement gleaming in their eyes. "Come on, it'll be fun," Ken said, leading the way down the stone path. The path was lined with moss-covered stones, and I noticed a few boundary stones set along the sides. They seemed to mark the sacred ground. But we stepped over them without a second thought. Inside the temple, the air was cool and still. Dust particles floated in the beams of light that filtered through the cracks in the wooden walls. We wandered deeper into the temple, our footsteps echoing in the silence. There were statues of Buddha, their faces serene and peaceful. I felt a strange pull toward them, but I reminded myself to respect this place. As we explored, I noticed a bell hanging from a wooden beam. It was beautiful, adorned with intricate designs. "Let's ring it," Yuki suggested, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "No, we shouldn't," I warned. "It's a taboo to ring the bell at night." "Oh, come on. What's the worst that could happen?" Ken said, rolling his eyes. I hesitated but felt the weight of their excitement. Finally, I sighed and nodded. Yuki reached up and pulled the rope. The bell rang out, its sound echoing through the temple. It felt wrong, like a disturbance in the air. I shivered again, and a gust of wind blew through the open doorway, making the lanterns flicker. "See? Nothing happened," Ken said, grinning, but I felt uneasy. We decided to sit in the main hall, surrounded by the statues. The atmosphere was thick, and I could almost hear whispers in the air. "This place is creepy," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "Just relax," Yuki replied. "It's all in your head." As the night deepened, we heard a soft rustling sound from the back of the temple. My heart raced as I turned toward the noise. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Ken said, his bravado fading. "Let's check it out." We crept toward the sound, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The rustling grew louder, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. We reached a small room filled with old scrolls and forgotten artifacts. In the corner, I saw a shadow move. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer, just silence. Suddenly, a figure appeared, a woman in a flowing kimono, her hair long and black. Her eyes were wide and she looked right at me. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. I stumbled back, fear gripping me. "What do you want?" I managed to ask. She reached out her hand, but I felt a chill wash over me. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind us. "We need to get out," I shouted, banging on the door. "Calm down," Ken yelled. "Let's find another way." We searched for another exit, but the windows were sealed tight. The woman's voice echoed in my mind. "Help me." Then, the lights flickered, and the shadows danced around us. I felt a presence, something dark and heavy. "We shouldn't have come here," I said, panic rising in my chest. Suddenly, the woman appeared again, standing in front of us. "You disturbed my rest," she said, her voice cold and haunting. I felt my heart race. "I'm sorry, we didn't mean to," I cried. "You must pay for your trespass," she said, her eyes narrowing. Then everything went black. I felt a rush of air, and when the lights came back on, the woman was gone. The door swung open and we bolted outside, gasping for breath. The night was quiet, but I felt an unease settle in my stomach. We decided to leave the temple grounds, but as we walked back, I noticed that Ken was missing. "Where's Ken?" I asked, panic rising again. "I thought he was with you," Yuki replied, looking around frantically. We called his name, but there was no answer. "We have to go back," I said, my heart pounding. We rushed back into the temple, calling for him. The atmosphere felt thicker, almost suffocating. We searched room after room, but there was no sign of him. Finally, we reached the main hall again. I felt a sense of dread wash over me. "Ken?" I shouted, my voice echoing. Then I saw something on the floor near the statues. I stepped closer, my heart sinking. It was Ken lying still, his eyes wide open. "Oh no," I screamed, rushing to his side. "Ken, wake up!" But there was no response. He was cold, lifeless. Yuki fell to her knees crying. "What happened?" she sobbed, shaking him. "I don't know," I cried, feeling helpless. "We have to get out of here." But as we turned to leave, the woman appeared again, blocking our way. "You should not have come here," she said, her voice echoing. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "What do you want from us?" I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "You must pay for your actions," she said, her voice cold and unyielding. I turned to run, but the darkness enveloped me. I felt a pull, a force dragging me down. I couldn't escape. The last thing I saw was Ken's lifeless body on the floor, and then everything went dark. The old hospital stood at the edge of town, its crumbling walls and shattered windows a testament to years of neglect. It was a place that held many secrets, and most people avoided it. They said it was haunted. I had heard the stories, but I didn't believe in ghosts. My friends dared me to explore it, and I couldn't resist the challenge. One crisp autumn evening, we gathered at the hospital's entrance. The air was thick with anticipation and a hint of fear. The sun was setting, casting eerie shadows across the ground. I pushed open the heavy door and it creaked loudly, echoing through the empty halls. My friends, Jake and Lisa, followed closely behind me. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the smell of mildew and decay. The walls were lined with peeling paint, and the floor was littered with debris. We switched on our flashlights, the beams cutting through the darkness. "This place is creepy," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Come on, it's just an old hospital," I said, trying to sound brave. "Let's see what's inside." We moved cautiously down the hallway, our footsteps echoing. In the silence. The further we went, the more uneasy I felt. I could hear the faint sound of dripping water somewhere in the distance. It was unsettling. Suddenly, we heard a loud bang from a nearby room. We froze, exchanging nervous glances. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked, his eyes wide. "Yeah," I replied, my heart racing. "Let's check it out." We approached the door, which was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, revealing a dark room filled with old medical equipment. The sight was disturbing. Rusty gurneys and broken IV stands surrounded us. In the corner, something caught my eye. It was a dusty old mirror, cracked and tarnished. I stepped closer, peering into it. As I looked into the mirror, I thought I saw a figure behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. "What's wrong?" Lisa asked, noticing my sudden movement. "I thought I saw someone," I said, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. "Let's keep moving." We continued deeper into the hospital, exploring room after room. Each one was more unsettling than the last. We found old patient files scattered on the floor, their contents faded and illegible. The atmosphere felt thick, as if the walls were closing in on us. Then we stumbled upon the old surgical theater. The lights were still intact, flickering ominously. The operating table was stained and worn, a chilling reminder of the past. "This is where they used to perform surgeries," Jake said, peering around. "It feels like something terrible happened here." Suddenly, Lisa gasped. "Look!" She pointed to the far wall. There, painted in faded red, were handprints that seemed to reach out toward us. They looked fresh, as if someone had pressed their hands against the wall just moments ago. Let's get out of here, I said, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. We turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind us. The sound echoed in the small room and panic set in. "What the hell?" Jake shouted, banging on the door. "Calm down," I yelled, trying to keep my cool. "There has to be another way out." We searched for another exit, but the windows were boarded up and the air felt colder. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow move across the room. I turned to follow it, but it vanished. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "See what?" Lisa replied, her eyes wide with fear. "I swear I saw something," I said, feeling the panic rise in my chest. Just then, the lights flickered and went out completely, plunging us into darkness. "Everyone stay close," I shouted, feeling my heart race. We huddled together, our breaths quickening. I could hear the sound of footsteps approaching, echoing, in the silence. "Who's there?" Jake called out, his voice shaking. There was no response. The footsteps grew louder, and I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room. "Let's get out of here," I yelled, and we rushed toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked," I panicked. Suddenly, a soft voice broke through the darkness. "Help me." It was faint, almost a whisper. We froze, fear gripping us. "Who is that?" Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, my heart racing. "We need to find a way out." I banged on the door, desperation rising within me. "Let us out. Please." But the only response was silence. Then, without warning, the lights flickered back on, revealing a figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a girl, her hair long and tangled, wearing a tattered hospital gown. Her eyes were wide and hollow, staring right at us. "Help me," she repeated, taking a step closer. "Get away from her," Jake shouted, pushing me back. We scrambled to the opposite side of the room, fear overwhelming us. The girl reached out her hand, her voice growing stronger. "Help me, please." I felt a strange pull toward her, like something was drawing me in. "We can't help you," I shouted back, my voice filled with panic. "We need to leave." Just then, the lights flickered again, and when they came back on, the girl was gone. The door swung open, and we rushed out, not looking back. We ran through the hospital, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Finally, we burst through the front door and into the night air. We collapsed on the grass outside, gasping for breath. "What just happened?" Lisa asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," I said, still trying to process everything, "but we need to tell someone." The next day, I woke up to a text from Jake. "Have you seen Lisa?" It read. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "No. Why?" I replied. "She didn't come home last night. I'm worried." He texted back. I felt a chill run down my spine. We had to find her. We searched everywhere, but there was no sign of her. Hours turned into days, and the search continued. Finally, we decided to return to the hospital. Maybe she went back there. As we approached the entrance, dread filled my heart. "What if she's in there?" Jake said, his voice trembling. "We have to check," I replied, forcing myself to move forward. The door creaked open as we stepped inside. The familiar smell of decay hit us, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. We searched room after room, calling out her name. "Lisa," I shouted, but there was no response. The atmosphere felt heavier, as if the hospital itself was alive with darkness. Finally, we reached the surgical theater again. My heart raced as I looked around. "She has to be here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Then we saw something on the operating table. I stepped closer and my stomach dropped. It was Lisa. She lay there, pale and lifeless, her eyes closed. "Oh no!" I screamed, rushing to her side. "Lisa, wake up!" But it was too late. She was cold, and I felt the tears streaming down my face. Jake fell to his knees, sobbing. "What happened?" he cried, shaking her. "Why is she like this?" I felt numb, unable to comprehend what was happening. I looked around, desperate for answers. The air felt charged, heavy with an unseen presence. I remembered the girl from before. "Help me." Suddenly, I felt a chill in the air. I turned and saw her standing in the corner again, her eyes locked onto mine. "You didn't help me," she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "I didn't know how," I cried out, feeling helpless. "Now, you must pay," she said softly, and the room grew darker. I stumbled back, feeling a pressure in my chest. The walls seemed to close in around me. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut. I banged on it, panic rising. "Let me out!" I screamed, but the echoes swallowed my words. The girl stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "You ignored my call," she said, her voice cold and empty. "You will join her." I felt a pull, a darkness wrapping around me. I struggled, but it was no use. I could see Lisa's lifeless body on the table, and I knew I was next. The last thing I remembered was her reaching out to me, and then everything went black. The old temple stood at the foot of the mountain, hidden behind a long row of ancient trees. I had always seen it from a distance, the tall red torii gate and the curved roof, but I never thought I would go inside. My grandmother used to warn me not to wander near the temple after dark. She said the spirits there did not like to be disturbed, and that the place was protected by old rituals and boundary stones. I never believed in such things. To me, they were just stories to scare children. One summer evening, my friends and I decided to visit the temple. It was supposed to be a dare. We were bored and wanted to do something exciting. There were 4 of us: me, my cousin Yuto, my friend Saki, and her older brother Kenji. Kenji was the one who suggested we go at night. He said he wanted to take photos of the temple under the full moon. Saki was nervous but agreed to come. Yuto said he wanted to see if the stories were true. We met at the bottom of the mountain path just after sunset. The air was warm but felt heavy, and the woods were full of the sound of insects. We walked along the stone path past the boundary stones that marked the entrance to the sacred ground. Saki stopped and bowed at the first stone, but Kenji just laughed and walked ahead. I followed, feeling a little uneasy. At the torii gate, Saki asked if we should purify ourselves with water at the small basin, like people did before entering a shrine. Kenji said it was pointless, but Saki insisted. She washed her hands and mouth, and Yuto did the same. I hesitated, then followed their example. Kenji refused and walked straight through the gate, calling for us to hurry. The temple grounds were quiet. The main hall stood in the middle, surrounded by old stone lanterns and a row of small shrines. The bell tower stood to one side, its bell hanging silent and dark. Kenji started taking pictures, moving from one building to another. Saki and I stayed close together, watching the shadows move in the corners. Yuto wandered toward the small shrine at the back where wooden prayer plaques hung from the beams. We spent some time exploring. Saki found a small Omamori amulet on the ground and picked it up. She said someone must have dropped it. Kenji told her to keep it for luck, but Saki looked worried. She said it was bad to take something left as an offering. Kenji just shrugged and walked away. As the sky grew darker, Kenji dared us to ring the bell in the tower. He said it would make the spirits come out. Saki begged him not to, but Kenji climbed the steps and grabbed the rope. He laughed and pulled it hard. The bell rang out, loud and deep, echoing through the trees. The sound sent chills down my spine. Right after the bell stopped, the air grew cold. The wind picked up, and the leaves rustled. I felt like someone was watching us. Saki whispered that we should leave, but Kenji wanted to go inside the main hall. The doors were closed, but he pushed them open. Inside it was dark except for the faint glow of old lanterns. There was a large Buddha statue at the far end, surrounded by offerings and incense. Kenji walked up to it and took a picture with his phone. Then he laughed and made a joke about the statue's face. Saki told him to stop, but Kenji reached out and touched the statue's hand. I felt a wave of fear, and Saki started to cry. Suddenly the lanterns flickered and went out. The room filled with a cold wind. I heard a soft whisper, like chanting, coming from the shadows. Kenji turned around, his face pale. "Let's go," he said, but his voice shook. We ran outside. The air was thick and heavy. The path back to the gate seemed longer than before. As we hurried past the small shrine, Yuto called out. He was staring at something behind the wooden prayer plaques. We went to see. There was a small bell swinging by itself, even though there was no wind. Next to it was a katana sword, old and rusty, leaning against the shrine. Saki said we should not touch anything, but Kenji reached for the sword. The moment his hand touched the handle, the bell stopped swinging. The air turned icy cold. I saw a shadow move behind the shrine, tall and thin, with long hair covering its face. Saki screamed. Kenji dropped the sword and backed away, shaking. We all ran down the path, past the boundary stones and into the woods. We did not stop until we reached the road. Kenji was breathing hard, his face white. He said he felt something grab his arm when he touched the sword. Saki was crying and Yuto kept looking back at the trees. That night I could not sleep. I kept hearing the sound of the bell and the deep echo of the temple's bell in my dreams. Early the next morning, Saki called me. She sounded scared. She said Kenji had not come home. His parents thought he was at a friend's house, but he had not answered his phone. We met at the temple gate. Saki, Yuto, and I walked up the path calling Kenji's name. The temple grounds were silent. The bell tower looked even darker than before. We searched everywhere, but there was no sign of Kenji. Finally, we went to the main hall. The doors were closed, but I pushed them open. Inside, it was cold and dark. The Buddha statue stood at the far end, but something was wrong. There was a shape lying on the floor in front of the statue. It was Kenji. He was wearing the same clothes as last night, but his face was pale and twisted in fear. His eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. His hands were clenched around his throat as if he had tried to pull something off. There were red marks on his neck like someone had strangled him. Saki screamed and ran out. Yuto froze, unable to move. I stood there shaking, unable to look away. The air felt heavy and cold, and I thought I heard chanting again, soft and distant. The police came and took Kenji's body away. They said it was a heart attack, or maybe he choked, but none of us believed it. Saki's family brought a priest to cleanse the temple. They said the spirits were angry because we broke the rules. Saki blamed herself for picking up the amulet. Yuto stopped talking to everyone for a while. I still dream about that night. Sometimes I see the shadow behind the shrine or hear the bell ringing in the dark. I never go near the temple now, not even in the daytime. People say the old rituals protect the place, but I know better. The spirits there do not forget. They are always watching, waiting for someone to break the rules again. It started with a dare. We were a group of 4, all of us bored teenagers looking for something to do. There was an old hospital on the edge of town, empty for years, with broken windows and weeds growing everywhere. People said it was haunted. Some said they saw lights on at night, even though there was no electricity. Others talked about strange noises or shadows moving behind the glass. We laughed about it, but deep down, I think we were all a little scared. One evening, my friend Mark suggested we go inside. He said we should spend an hour there, just to prove we weren't scared. He promised to buy dinner for anyone who made it the whole time. Sarah rolled her eyes and said she wasn't afraid of ghosts. Tom said he'd do it if I did. I didn't want to seem like a coward, so I agreed. We met at sunset and climbed the fence behind the hospital. The building looked even bigger up close. The paint was peeling and the doors were chained shut, but we found a broken window in the basement. Mark went in first, then Sarah, then Tom, then me. It was cold inside, and the air smelled like dust and mold. Our footsteps echoed in the empty halls. We used our phones as flashlights. The light barely reached the end of the hallway. Old wheelchairs and beds stood in the corners, covered in dust. Sometimes we heard the wind whistling through the broken windows. Other times it sounded like footsteps behind us, but when we turned around, nothing was there. We wandered from room to room. Mark kept joking, trying to scare us, but his voice sounded nervous. Sarah took pictures, saying she wanted proof for her friends. Tom stayed close to me. We found an old elevator, stuck between floors, and a nurse's station with papers scattered everywhere. On one wall, someone had written, "Get out," in red paint. Sarah laughed and took a selfie with it. After a while, we reached the old operating rooms. The doors were heavy, and the glass was cracked. Inside, the tables were still there, along with rusty tools and broken lights. Mark dared Sarah to lie on the table, but she refused. Tom shivered and said we should leave soon. I checked my phone. We'd only been inside for 30 minutes. Suddenly, we heard a noise from down the hall. It sounded like someone crying, soft and far away. We all froze. Mark whispered that it was probably just the wind, but Sarah said it didn't sound like wind. We listened. The crying got louder, then stopped. Mark said we should check it out. I didn't want to, but no one wanted to look scared. We followed the sound to the end of the hall. There was a door half open, leading to a small room. Inside it was dark and cold. In the corner, I saw something move. Sarah shined her phone, light at it. There was a woman sitting on the floor wearing a hospital gown. Her hair hung over her face. She rocked back and forth, crying softly. We all stopped. I felt my skin crawl. Mark called out, "Hey, are you okay?" The woman didn't answer. She just kept rocking. Sarah stepped closer, but Tom grabbed her arm. "Don't," he whispered. Mark took a step forward too, but then the woman stopped crying. She lifted her head and we saw her face. Her eyes were black, and her mouth was twisted in a strange smile. She stood up. The room grew colder. I felt like I couldn't move. The woman pointed at Mark and whispered something I couldn't understand. Mark stumbled back, tripped, and fell. The woman screamed a high, horrible sound, and then she was gone. The room was empty. We all ran. We didn't stop until we were out of the hospital, back in the streetlights. Mark was shaking. He said he felt like someone was touching his neck. Sarah was crying. Tom kept looking back at the building. We promised each other not to talk about what happened. We said it was just our imagination, just a trick of the light. But the next day I got a call from Tom. He said Mark hadn't shown up for school. We tried calling him, but he didn't answer. After school, we went to his house. His mom said he hadn't come out of his room all morning. She thought he was sick. We knocked on his door, but there was no answer. His mom unlocked the door and we went in. Mark was lying on his bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. His face was pale, and his lips were blue. His hands were clenched around his neck, as if he'd tried to pull something off. There were red marks on his skin, like fingers pressing hard. His mom screamed. Sarah ran out of the room. Tom just stood there, frozen. The police came. They said it was a heart attack, or maybe he choked in his sleep. But we all knew the truth. We had seen the woman. We had heard her scream. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her black eyes, her twisted smile. Sarah stopped talking to us after that. She deleted all the photos from her phone. Tom and I tried to go back to normal, but things were different. Sometimes I saw shadows moving in the corners of my room. I heard crying in the night. Once, I thought I saw the woman standing at the end of my bed watching me. A few weeks later, Tom called me late at night. He sounded scared. He said he'd been hearing things, footsteps in his house, whispers in the dark. He said he saw someone in his bathroom mirror just for a second. He begged me to come over, but I was too scared. The next morning, Tom was gone. His parents found him in the bathtub, water overflowing onto the floor. His eyes were open, and his mouth was twisted in terror. There were bruises on his arms, like someone had grabbed him and held him under. The police said it was an accident. I knew it wasn't. Now it's just me and Sarah. We don't talk anymore. I see her sometimes, at the store, but she looks away. I don't blame her. I don't sleep much these days. Sometimes I hear crying in the hallway, or see a shadow in the bathroom mirror. I keep my lights on at night. I check the locks on my doors and windows, but it doesn't help. I think about the hospital all the time. I wonder if the woman is still there waiting for someone else to find her. I wonder if she'll come for me next. I try to tell myself it was just a dream, just my mind playing tricks. But I know what I saw. I know what happened to Mark and Tom. Sometimes, I wake up in the night and feel cold hands on my neck. I hear a whisper in my ear, words I can't understand. I'm scared all the time now. I wish we'd never gone into that hospital. I wish we'd listened to the stories and stayed away. But it's too late. She's already found us. I don't know how much longer I have. Every night the shadows get closer, the crying gets louder. I see her face in the dark, smiling at me. I try to scream, but no sound comes out. I know she's coming for me. I know there's nothing I can do. All I can do is wait. When I was a young man, I worked at a temple. The temple sat at the end of a narrow street, its red roof tiles shining in the sun. There were stone lions at the gate, and a big incense burner stood in the middle of the square. Every day, people came to pray, burn incense, and offer joss paper. The air always smelled of smoke and flowers. I liked working there. The old walls felt safe, and I believed the deities would protect us. The temple had many rules. We could not touch the deity statues unless we cleaned them during special days. We were told never to enter the main hall after midnight. If we found a peace amulet on the ground, we had to pick it up and put it back on the altar. The head priest, an old man with a long beard, said these rules kept us safe. He told us stories about people who broke the rules and suffered bad luck. I listened, but I did not really believe the stories. One summer, a new worker joined us. His name was Wei. He was a few years older than me and liked to joke about everything. He said the temple was just an old building and the rules were silly. He made fun of the spirit medium, who wore a red robe and shook when the gods entered his body. Wei said he wanted to see if the deities were real. One afternoon, we were cleaning the main hall. The head priest was away and the temple was quiet. Wei looked at the biggest deity statue, a fierce god with a black face and golden armor. He smiled and said, "Let's see if anything happens." Before I could stop him, he reached out and touched the statue's hand. I felt cold all over. I told him to stop, but he laughed and said nothing happened. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about what Wei did. I dreamed of the deity statue. Its eyes glowed red, and it pointed at me. I woke up sweating. The next morning, Wei came to work as usual. He looked tired and pale. He said he had strange dreams, but he did not want to talk about them. A few days later, something else happened. Someone stole money from the donation box. The head priest was very angry. He called all the staff and asked if anyone knew what happened. No one said anything, but Wei looked nervous. That night I saw him counting money behind the temple. I asked him where he got it, and he just smiled and told me not to worry. The next day, a spirit medium came to the temple. People crowded the square burning incense and waiting for answers. The medium went into a trance, shaking and shouting words from the gods. He said the temple was angry. He said someone had broken the rules and stolen from the gods. He warned that something bad would happen if the person did not confess. Wei just laughed and walked away. That night a storm hit the temple. The wind howled and the rain poured down. I was in my room listening to the thunder when I heard footsteps outside. I looked out and saw Wei walking toward the main hall. He carried a bag, and his face looked strange in the lightning. I followed him, calling his name, but he did not answer. He pushed open the heavy doors and went inside. I waited outside, too scared to go in. After a while, I heard him shouting. Then everything went quiet. The rain stopped and the air felt heavy. I waited, but he did not come out. In the morning, the temple staff gathered in the square. Wei was missing. The head priest asked if anyone had seen him. I told them what I saw. The priest frowned and took a bunch of talismans from a drawer. He led us into the main hall. The air was cold, and the incense burner was still smoking from the night before. We found Wei lying in front of the deity statue. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth was twisted in terror. His hands were clutching a peace amulet, and joss. Paper was scattered around him. There were red marks on his arms like someone had grabbed him. The head priest knelt and whispered prayers, while the other staff covered their faces in fear. Some people started crying. I could not move. I stared at Wei's face and felt sick. The police came, but they could not explain how Wei died. There were no wounds except the red marks. The doctor said his heart stopped from fright. The head priest said the gods had punished him for breaking the rules and stealing from the temple. After that, no one joked about the temple rules again. We cleaned the hall and burned more incense every day. The spirit medium came and performed rituals to calm the spirits. For weeks, people left offerings and prayed for peace. I still work at the temple. I follow every rule now. When I see the fierce deity statue, I remember Wei's face and the look of terror in his eyes. Sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps in the main hall. I do not go to check. I light incense, bow my head, and pray for protection. Some things are better left alone. Last autumn, I went to visit my cousin Marek in Poland. He lives in a small village near a big forest called Białowieża. The trees there are old and tall, and the whole place feels ancient. People in the village talk about the forest a lot. Some say you should never go too deep, especially after dark. There are stories about people getting lost and hearing strange voices calling their names. Marek always laughed at these stories. He said they were just old legends. One Saturday, Marek suggested we go camping in the forest with his friends. It sounded fun, and I wanted to see more of the woods. We packed our bags, brought some food, and set out in the afternoon. There were 5 of us: Marek, his girlfriend Zosia, his friend Piotr, Piotr's younger sister Kasia, and me. We walked for a long time, following a narrow path. The air was cool, and the leaves made a soft carpet under our feet. Sometimes we saw deer or heard birds, but mostly it was quiet. We found a clearing and set up our tents. As the sun went down, we built a fire and started to cook sausages. Everyone was in a good mood. We told stories and laughed. When it got dark, the forest changed. The trees looked bigger and the shadows seemed to move. Zosia said her grandmother told her never to whistle in the woods at night or the spirits would come. Marek made a joke and started whistling loudly. Zosia got angry and told him to stop. Piotr joined in, and soon they were both whistling and laughing. Later we sat around the fire and Kasia said she needed to use the bathroom. She took a flashlight and walked into the trees. After a few minutes, she called for Piotr to come help her. Piotr sighed and got up. They disappeared into the darkness. We waited, but they didn't come back. Marek said they were probably just fooling around, but Zosia looked worried. She called out their names, but there was no answer. We waited longer. The fire burned lower. The forest felt colder. Marek said he would go look for them. I said I would go too, but Zosia wanted to stay by the fire. We took our flashlights and went into the trees, following the path Kasia had taken. The light from the fire faded behind us. The woods were quiet, except for the sound of our footsteps and the wind in the branches. After a while, we saw a faint light ahead. We hurried toward it thinking it was Kasia or Piotr. Instead, we found Kasia's flashlight lying on the ground, shining on some roots. There was no sign of her or Piotr. Marek picked up the flashlight and called their names. Suddenly, we heard a strange sound like someone whispering. It came from deeper in the forest. Marek whispered that it was probably just the wind, but I could see he was scared. We walked further, shining our lights all around. The trees seemed to close in on us. Then I saw something move between the trunks. It looked like a person, but the shape was wrong. It was too tall and its arms were too long. I grabbed Marek's arm and pointed. He saw it too. The figure moved quickly, almost gliding between the trees. We froze, not sure what to do. Then it disappeared. Marek said we should go back to the camp. We hurried back, almost running. When we reached the clearing, Zosia was crying. She said she heard someone calling her name from the woods, but when she looked, no one was there. We told her what we saw. She wanted to leave right away, but Marek said we should wait for Piotr and Kasia. We sat by the fire, too scared to talk. The night felt endless. Every sound made us jump. Finally, just before dawn, we heard footsteps on the path. Piotr stumbled into the clearing, alone. His face was pale, and he was shaking. He said he and Kasia got lost. He heard someone calling his name, but when he turned, he saw a tall, thin figure standing between the trees. It had no face, just a smooth, pale surface where its eyes and mouth should be. Kasia screamed and ran, and Piotr chased after her, but he lost her in the dark. He wandered for hours before finding his way back. We searched for Kasia at sunrise. We called her name and looked everywhere, but there was no answer. Finally, Marek found her. She was lying at the base of a tree, her eyes wide open, staring at the sky. Her skin was cold, and her lips were blue. There were long scratches on her arms, as if she had tried to climb the tree or fight something off. Zosia screamed and covered her mouth, and Marek fell to his knees crying. I just stood there frozen, not knowing what to do. The police came and took Kasia's body. They said it was probably hypothermia, but they couldn't explain the scratches or the look of terror on her face. Piotr wouldn't talk to anyone after that. He stayed in his room and wouldn't eat. Marek blamed himself for whistling in the woods. Zosia refused to go near the forest ever again. I left Poland a week later, but I still dream about that night. Sometimes, I see the faceless figure standing at the edge of the trees, waiting. A few months after I got home, I got a message from Marek. He said Piotr had died. They found him in his room, sitting on his bed, his eyes open and his mouth twisted in fear. There were scratches on his arms, just like Kasia. Marek said he sometimes hears whistling outside his window at night, even though he lives far from the forest now. He said he wishes he had never gone camping that night. Now, whenever I hear the wind in the trees, I think about that forest. I wonder if the stories are true, and if something really does live there, waiting for people who don't respect the old rules. If you ever visit a forest in Poland, remember this story. Don't whistle at night, and if you see something tall and faceless moving between the trees, don't follow it. Some things in the forest are better left alone.